I did a video recently where I briefly mentioned a 3-step Bio Detox program that we do here in our center for our patients that has we've gotten a lot of response regarding, as we've had people contact us inquiring as to whether or not they'd be benefited by this program or if they would be a candidate for it. But before I address that question specifically, I'd like to share with you some information that I found very, very interesting. Here, according to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, they stated that over 35% of the food tested, this was back in 1998, so there's been a passage of time, of course, but back in 1998, over 35% of the food that they tested contained pesticide residues. And of those pesticides, over 53 of them were carcinogens. That means that these pesticides were known to cause cancer. And they were being used and are still being used today, as a matter of fact, on what they call the major crops, one of which is apples and also potatoes and also tomatoes, and they call them the major crops because they're consumed by so many people. Also, they stated that there were over 10,000 additives combined with the foods that you eat. Now, these additives might be chemical stabilizers, they might be colorings, they might be spoilage retardants, they might be emulsifiers. They are all types of chemicals, words of which most of us can't pronounce, but those are added to our food supply as well. And they went on to state this, that the average individual, the food that you ate last year, of the food that you ate last year, over 150 pounds of that was not food at all, but was actually made up of the chemical additives that you ingested. Now, also, according to the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, they stated that for Americans, our drinking water now is laced with pesticides. And back in 2000 alone, back in the year 2000, we've had 15 years now to make it much worse than what it was then. But back at that time, there were over 4 billion pounds of chemicals released into the ground that you and I walk on here in the United States, and over 260 million pounds of chemicals were discharged into our lakes and into our rivers. And by their own admission, they're stating that it's made the fish unsafe to eat and the water unsafe to swim in, let alone drink. So the question now is not, well, am I toxic? Because I think that issue has been settled just by you and I living in the environment in which we're blessed to find ourselves, but rather, how toxic are we? Now, for those of you that don't want to have any testing to see, whether I'm toxic or not, or dismissing yourself as, oh, it's not me, I'm sure it's somebody else, let me remind you that being in this environment, for every action, there's always an equal and opposite reaction that occurs. And regardless of how careful you and I might be in the lifestyles we live, we're still subjected to these toxins through the foods we eat, the beverages we drink, the air we breathe, the cosmetics, the hygiene products we use. All of these things will affect us to some degree. Now, if you're still somewhat dubious as to whether or not this program might benefit you, well, perhaps you can answer that question better than I then at this time. The first one, some of the typical things that happen when a person has a toxic overload is that he or she experiences headaches. Now, when I say this, a lot of people are quick to dismiss the headaches and say, well, I only have 2 or 3 or 4 a month. Well, really, the number doesn't matter, even if you only have 1 a month. That is not normal. It may be typical, but it's certainly not normal. You see, for a body to be typical, that body is healthy, therefore having no headaches whatsoever. So again, that could be a strong indicator that indeed you have a toxic overload. Or if you experience chronic sinusitis or you have chronic sinus congestion, that too is a very good sign that you have a toxic overload. Now understand too, as I go on, this is not a total list, but these are some of the more common signs and symptoms that are expressed by the body when you do have a toxic overload. It may also affect your immune system, wherein you experience a cold, and the cold is long lasting. I mean, you know, it stays on with you for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. Or you might be an individual who gets a cold and gets over it only to get another one and another one and a fever or a flu or whatever it might be. But the bottom line is you have more sick days than well days. Or you might be a person who experiences recurring allergies. You know, you have a seasonal allergy only now to develop an allergy to this food or an allergy to this animal or whatever it might be. But what we're seeing here is a weakened immune system. That also, you might be an individual who has hormonal problems now because of a toxic overload. And it could be that it's affecting your thyroid or your pituitary gland, or it could be affecting your hormonal balance. It could affect you in a way that now you're pre-diabetic or you're a diabetic. And that could have been a result of a toxic overload. Much of this is totally able to be eliminated and eradicated, I might say, before I go any further. Or with the hormonal imbalance, you might even be one who experiences a lot of fluctuations in your moods. One moment you're happy, another moment you're sad, or you're laughing and then you're crying, or you feel depressed for some unknown reason. And this could be an expression too of a toxic overload. Also, and I was very interested to find this out, you could be an individual who has a chronic backache. Now, you know, I always thought when I first started studying the human body that backaches were totally the result of a nerve influence, a nerve interference of some type or sort. But I was surprised to learn that no, if you have toxic buildups in the system, the body can express itself with a chronic algia or an achiness that shows up many, many times in the lower back. And then, of course, the joint aches and pains that people have, or the fatigue that they go through. Some of these, as I said earlier, this is not a complete list, a total list, but these are some of the more common symptoms and signs that have been experienced by the individuals who have come in that we've found to have toxic overloads. So again, this program is for anybody. It's very easy to do, and as I stated earlier, it's effective for everybody who's ever gone through the program in its ability to change the quality of their life. And indeed, you know, if you're sick, you're certainly not living a happy life. It's not one that is a joy to go through. So if this is something that you might be interested in doing, please don't hesitate to give us a call, to give our office a call, and we are here at your service. And with the advent of the internet now, we've been able to help people with this program in particular in over 28 different states and over 8 or 9 different foreign countries. It's quite exciting. But now we've been able to help those people as well, and we'd certainly like to be able to help you too. I hope you found the information beneficial, and as always, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube station, which is Proactive Wellness. And if you have any questions or comments at all, we invite you to express those as well. And until the next video, we want to thank you for watching this one, and as always, God bless.